Hi, and welcome to episode 2 of Women of the Bible here at Sweet Sycamore. I'm Nicole, and I just want to welcome you to our devotions. If you are joining me for the first time, make sure and subscribe through YouTube or follow through podcast platforms just to be notified of all the upcoming episodes. For 8 weeks, we are digging into 3 Marys: Mary Magdalene, Mary from Bethany, and Mary, the mother of Jesus, in short 10-minute devotions. So let's get straight into this week's devotion as we revisit the second part of Mary Magdalene. In our last episode, we went over the passage that introduced her and her beautiful purpose in Jesus' ministry. So it shouldn't surprise us that as Jesus breathed his last breath on the cross, an earthquake hit the hill, the Roman officer shouts, "This man truly was the Son of God." And the next verse is in Matthew 27, verse 55, and it says, "And many women who had come from Galilee with Jesus to care for him were watching from a distance. Among them were Mary Magdalene." Mary had been with Jesus to care for him, and she did not leave him even at the cross. And this was something that would have been excruciating and so hard to watch. Now let's remember, it was not safe for these women to be close. The disciples had fled and were hidden, except for John, because they thought they were next. Mary was not safe to be close and being able to be identified as part of Jesus' inner circle as she was with this group of women. Why? Because history actually tells us they had no problem crucifying women. These women were not safe. They were putting a target on their own backs as they stood close by, weeping, I'm sure, as Jesus died. Mary Magdalene did not leave Jesus even when it could mean her own death. Oftentimes, the right thing is the most hardest thing to do, and we see this all over the scriptures. Mary Magdalene watched as Jesus breathed his last breath, but her story keeps going. If we jump over to John 20, verses 1 through 2, it says, "Early on Sunday morning, while it was still dark, Mary Magdalene came to the tomb and found that the stone had been rolled away from the entrance. She ran and found Simon Peter and the other disciple, the one whom Jesus loved. She said, 'They have taken the Lord's body out of the tomb, and we don't know where they have put him.'" When I read this verse, here's what I think. What did she expect to do? She is on her way to the tomb of Jesus. She wasn't alone. Mark tells us that Mary, the mother of James, was with her. But also, they came to anoint Jesus' body with spices for burial. So the two women are going to get the guards to allow them to roll away the stone, a giant boulder. These guards, the ones who are instructed to make sure no one got in, these guards who are they're just not worried about Jesus having a proper burial. I mean, he was a criminal who faced the ultimate Roman punishment. But Mary prepared the spices anyway. She walked to the tomb anyway. It's as if in her mind she was going to find a way, or at least do everything in her power to try. And what a beautiful example of faithfulness. True faithfulness is always measured in the middle of hardship. Mary was faithful even in the impossible. Are we? Are we faithful even in the face of impossibility? The disciples run to the tomb and they're looking, and it tells us in John 20:10, it says, "Then they went home." They didn't see anything, so they left. So let's paint this picture. The guards are gone. The tomb is open. The body is gone. The disciples leave. There seems to be no miracle here in this moment. It's a tragedy. In fact, it's a worst case scenario because she can't even give her Savior a proper burial without a body. Somebody took him, and somebody was more powerful than her to get beyond the guards, or perhaps even had control over the guards. It was officially over. Yet it says that Mary stayed. Mary Magdalene was faithful in the midst of this tragedy. If we continue on verses 11 and 13, it says, "Mary was standing outside the tomb crying, and as she wept, she stopped and looked in. She saw 2 white-robed angels, one sitting at the head and the other at the foot of the place where the body of Jesus had been lying. 'Dear woman, why are you crying?' the angel asked her. 'Because they have taken away my Lord,' she replied, 'and I don't know where they have put him.'" She sits there crying at these things that just appear. And honestly, I think about this. I think that what'd she do? She just looks in one more time, maybe for a clue or maybe for an answer. And she sees two angels just chilling there. And what surprises me most is she is not shocked. There's no shock. There's no fear. Perhaps she didn't perceive them as angels. Perhaps a woman who was once consumed with 7 demons was deeply aware of the spiritual realm. Maybe she was used to the beautiful presence of angels. Or maybe she thought she was seeing things, talking to things that weren't actually there. After all, she didn't badger them with questions. She simply answers their questions. Or maybe nothing else mattered. It didn't matter who was sitting there in the absence of her Savior. If we continue on with the verses 14 and 15, it says, she turned to leave and saw someone standing there. It was Jesus, but she didn't recognize him. Dear woman, why are you crying? Jesus asked her. Who are you looking for? Jesus has to ask her 2 questions just to even get her attention. She doesn't recognize him. Maybe her eyes were so foggy with the amount of tears in her eyes. Maybe she never actually looked up to see who she was talking to. She was looking for a body, after all, not a living human. Now, Jesus didn't say, hey, I'm here, it's me. He simply asked her a question about her own unbelief. He was trying to break through her unbelief and her forgetfulness of what Jesus had already told her. Who are you looking for? What are you really seeking? Man, sometimes in my own devotion and dedication, I can easily forget what I am really seeking. And the next line, it says, she thought he was a gardener. Sir, she said, if you have taken him away, tell me where you have put him, and I will go get him. Of course, this cracks me up too. This woman is determined. She's like, tell me where his body is. I will throw him over my back and I will carry him back. Just tell me. But in verse 16, Jesus said, Mary, and she turned to him and cried out, Rabboni, which is Hebrew for teacher. It's so interesting to me that the moment that he says her name, there was an intimacy where she knew that it was Jesus, an intimacy that God desires to have with every single one of us. Do you know he knows your name? An intimacy where the sheep know the Father's voice when he calls for them. An intimacy that made her hug him in this giant bear hug. Because Jesus says this to her next. In verse 17, he says, don't cling to me, for I haven't yet ascended to the Father. But go find my brothers and tell them I am ascending to my Father and your Father, to my God and your God. Mary Magdalene found the disciples and told them, I have seen the Lord. Then she gave them his message. He basically says to her, that was a great hug, but we got stuff we got to go do. Don't cling to me. We've got to go. We can't just sit here. We've got work to do. The first person that got to see the risen Savior was Mary Magdalene. Why? In a world where a woman's voice couldn't even be used in a court of law because it never could be mattered for anything. So why her? Why a woman? Well, I believe it's because she knew what she was saved from. I believe that she served him out of a deep love, and it's because she was faithful even in the midst of the impossibility. She was loved so much that the way Jesus said her name made her identify her Savior. As we wrap up this devotion, I have 2 questions I want you to either ask yourself or get a group of gals and talk about it together. The first question is this: are you faithful even in the impossible? When the going gets tough, do you get going? Or do you sink in your heels and become faithful even in the hardest moments? The second question, what are you truly seeking? We can get off base so easily. We think we are looking for something good or doing something good, but it still can miss the point of seeking the living God. As we close, Mary didn't understand everything. She started seeking for a body instead of looking for the risen Savior. She didn't fully get all what he was communicating to her, even throughout her journey with him. But she was present. She was eager. And with a beautiful heart of gratitude, she was persistent. And because of her faithfulness, she was the first to see the risen Jesus. And that is a beautiful reward. A faithful heart will always see Jesus. Thank you so much for joining me in today's devotion. If you would like to join a community of women on Instagram, I invite you to join us at Sweet Sycamore Devos. We will be back next week with another devotion, and until then, let's be faithful even in the impossible, just like Mary Magdalene.